Welcome to today's Corporate Venturing Insider Series. I am so excited today because we have one of our best business schools in the world, IESE, and Julia and Josemaria are going to share a little bit about corporate venturing, but they are the ones from the teaching side. So I think we are going to learn a lot today. Julia, Josemaria, thank you for spending time with us.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, for inviting us.
So let's start, maybe Julia first. Tell us why you got interested in corporate venturing.
That's very interesting. Good. Well, I am an engineer by training, and I did my PhD on growth strategies. And I was very interested in understanding how large corporations grow and what can they do in terms of growing. And basically, after some years of doing different strategies and different ways of looking at the companies and how they are growing, I stumbled with this idea of why not growing through working with startups. And that was precisely why we got into this corporate venturing idea, and it was already several years ago. And that's why I started doing that.
Very nice. How about you, Josemaria?
So from my side, I'm going to be this year at IESE for 11 years, more or less. And I have been lucky to be working with Julia. And a few years back, I was introducing one of the projects of corporate venturing. And since there, I have been involved somehow on those activities. I see that there is a huge trend on this topic, not only because corporations, the number of corporations working with startups has increased dramatically, especially since 2016, not only in corporate venture capital, but other mechanisms, but also there are a lot of synergies where there is a win-win situation for both corporations and startups.
Very nice. So, Julia, you talk about working with startups, but most corporations don't really know how to work with startups. So, how do you approach such a topic, which is not trivial? It sounds easy, but it's not.
Not trivial at all. And in fact, this is why we started studying it, because you can hear many times these sentences where they say we are working with and blah, blah, blah. But the question is how. And many companies really were eager to understand the process, how to do it. And this is precisely, we thought that our research, I like to do field research. What it means is really being in touch with the ones that are doing it and trying to understand how are they doing it, conceptualize what they are doing it, and then making it available for many others that they are probably thinking in starting or doing it. So basically the idea was precisely that, because it's not so easy to understand how, first because the startup market is an unstructured market. Yes. So it's like, how do we approach that when we, in a corporation, in a large corporations, we are used to approach things in a very standard manner, and we have databases and we have, the channels that are already there and so on and so forth. So how do you approach an unstructured market? So this is why we thought that it would be very interesting. And when we started, we even find it more interesting. So that's why for the last, 10 years, as Josemaria said, we have been working, not 10, it's a little bit less, but we have been working on that.
Very nice. Josemaria, I saw you were writing something on your notepad, so I'm sure you have something more to add.
So I would say some of the, not dilemmas, but probably misunderstandings that we have identified, especially at the beginning of this field research in the market. One is, and I have been mentioning that before, corporate venturing is not new. Since 1914, there has been cases and research, for instance, General Motors and DuPont, and many more. However, the discussion has been quite focused on corporate venture capital, one of the 11 mechanisms. Something that we describe in one of our first studies is that there are plenty of other mechanisms that are growing at the speed. For instance, the venture client, the case of BMW Garage in Germany, where the corporation is the first client of the startup, or a venture builder, or also called an excavator, when a corporation asks to a third party to create a startup to work afterwards. So one first statement that we mentioned there is this is not only, corporate venture is not only corporate venture capital, but there are plenty of mechanisms as we describe in one of our recent pieces at Harvard Business Review. Moreover, the second statement, and we have built recently a new project around that jointly with the European Commission, is corporate venturing is not only for large corporations, but also for small and medium enterprises. If we look markets in Latin America, in Asia, where you are right now, in Europe, and in many others, for instance, here in Spain, where we are based right now, 99.9% of the market are small and medium enterprises. So the second statement is this is also for small and medium enterprises.
Mm-hmm. I think that's very interesting, and I want to double click on this. But you're right. I'm joining from Singapore today. Medium size. So most people think corporate venturing is for big companies, billion-dollar type of revenues. They can afford to have a team doing this. But here you're saying there are some mechanisms, 11 you mentioned, that maybe are within reach for medium size and maybe for innovation and other purposes. Can you maybe share first what is the easiest step for one medium-sized company to start corporate venturing? I'm sure there are some which are difficult, but some which are easier.
Yes. So basically, I would say why is this identification with large corporations is precisely because corporate venturing was assimilated to corporate venture capital. And of course, to put together a fund, you need a lot of money. And that's not what usually small and medium-sized companies have. So basically, that's probably because everything started there. The other mechanism that also was there since the beginning is acquisition. Again, not easy for small and medium-sized sometimes to think about acquisitions. So that's why I think it has been very interesting to see that there are other mechanisms where companies can start collaborating with, at the end of the day, an enterprise that has technology or a business model that you may be interested in. Not necessarily acquiring it, but doing something else. So I would say the easiest thing to do is start doing pilots, challenges. So that's a very easy mechanism where you get exposed to different technologies, different ways of looking at a problem that maybe the company has. So if we go one step, I would say before that, the medium-sized or a small and medium-sized company, the first thing that you need to think about is about your strategy. Do you really have a strategy? Are you thinking about what is the framework where you are going to put all this activity? Otherwise, it becomes a me too. It becomes something that, someone is doing, I also want to do. Basically, it's like, do you really need something? You have a strategy for that. And I say that's probably the first step. And then the second step is like, okay, let's start understanding the ecosystem. That's the second thing. How do you understand an ecosystem? Basically, is getting into. You need to get into the ecosystem of startups. And one way to do it, maybe the easiest, is through a challenge, through something that is not very expensive, but at the same time allows you to meet regularly and I would say in a very structured way, a bunch of companies that may solve the problem that you have that internally you have not been able to. So I would say that's probably the best way to start. But that's just the beginning. So also to think that corporate venturing is just doing challenges, that would be really poor. If you do a challenge afterwards, it becomes a pilot, and then other mechanisms, as Josemaria mentioned.
In this direction, Nicolas, I like your question and also the answer from Julia, because it's not easy to select what are the right mechanisms of corporate venturing for your company, for each company. In one of the first studies, Julia did an amazing frame on how to classify those with three variables, where there were speed, cost, and what is the opportunity size or the type of startup. Is an opportunity and a startup or a scale-up, where you have all the 11 mechanisms. And I want to provide a counterintuitive data point to prove this, how much interesting was this. If you check what was the most adopted mechanism worldwide on corporate venturing in 2019, it was the corporate incubator. However, when we were doing deep dive into data on these three variables, we found that if we compare corporate incubators, most active, everyone is using, the go-to mechanism, and we compare it to the venture client, which was the kind of the new mechanism or recent mechanism that has increased at the speed, we found that with this mechanism, the venture client, you were able, on average, for sure, to get between 2 to 4 times more cost-effective and faster than the other mechanism. So here the conclusion is not don't use the corporate incubator, but to say before selecting your corporate venture mechanisms, use more data and less intuition, because now we have the data. 10 years ago, maybe we don't have available in the market this data, but now we have this data to take better decisions.
I would even say, before you start, read the IESE report. So let's go back first on the simplest step. So I like the challenges, which may lead to pilots. I think most companies would understand what pilots means, but challenges may not be so obvious. And clearly, Julia, I think you're making a very good point, which is start with the why, start with the strategy. And maybe you have a clear view about what pain point you're trying to solve. Now, how do you go about creating a challenge? And why would startups care about you setting up a challenge?
Very good. So yeah, it's a very good point. So let's say that the company has, it may have two main needs, let's say. The first one is optimization of your processes or your way of doing things. Nowadays, digitalization is on the table. Many people believe that technology strategy is about digitalization. And of course, that's true, because there is many things that can be done today digitally that would help you to optimize your own processes. Here, probably this is the easiest challenge that a company can identify. It's like, we would like to have, I don't know, an algorithm that helps us to sort out these type of things. And with this algorithm, we would be able to be faster, cheaper, and so on and so forth. Very good. But you don't have anyone in the company that can develop that. And you know that there is a company that probably is already doing that at a very good, with a very good quality, and maybe for other companies. And here is where it comes. Josemaria's mentioned the venture client way of working with that startup. We'll mention that later. But basically, it will be first is like identify what is your challenge. And the challenge at the end are very, I would say, specific. So this is one thing. A very different thing or a different thing would be, we are exploring a new area. We are exploring a new market. We are exploring a new way of doing things. And here, to put together the challenge is a little bit more open, right? Because you are exploring. In exploring, maybe you think about, for instance, let's say sustainability. You would like to be more sustainable, but you have no idea which type of materials are out there. You have no idea if there is CO2 capturing companies that are helping you to reduce your CO2, and so on and so forth. So basically, usually the challenges that you are facing in some of your regular processes can be solved by someone else outside. And doing a challenge at the end of the day is putting together the problem and showing it, and the way of showing it, we can talk later, showing it to the community of startups and others, but let's stay with startups, so you can find a solution. But there is also another type of challenges that are more exploratory, and here they're usually more open.
I like the way it's framed, which is you're making clear this is a challenge, but you don't know the solution.
Correct. And that's very important, because if you may have an intuition or where the solution could be. And precisely when you are in this first step of optimizing, usually you know what you are looking for. And here, probably it's easy then to find a solution for you. And that's why I think this is a good way to start, because it's more secure. But when you are more open, definitely you don't know the solution. And precisely that's what is nice about it, because many times you never thought that the solution would come from that side. So, or from that solution that the startup has. So basically, it's more interesting in terms of innovation, the second than the first. But maybe starting with the first is a good way to get used to talk, discuss, understand the world of the startups that many times is different from yours.
In a way, you set up a challenge hoping to be surprised with solutions you could not think about, which is very different from what companies would do with a request for proposal. You already know what type of solutions you want. Here you're going with a challenge, with the solutions you don't know how to solve, and you may be surprised by innovative ways to solve it.
Correct, and especially if they are coming from areas where you don't master, right? Because it's not your industry, it's not your business model, it's not your. So Basically, this is what I would call incorporating innovation or technology in your company, right? That's a very nice way to do it.
I actually want to double click on the different industry, and I think the sustainability example is a good one. Everyone is looking at solutions. Sometimes the solution comes from a completely different industry, and the challenge allows you to reach out way more widely than your current network.
Absolutely. And imagine, for instance, in terms of, because that's what we see, right? In terms of materials, in terms of energy consumption, in terms of, so depending on your challenge, you may have very different solutions that are precisely coming from very different ways of looking at the problem. And then it's the moment where the company first learns, because you learn where is all this coming from and what are the different solutions, but then you also choose. That is, which one fits your strategy better. That's why it's very important to have a good strategy, understanding where are you heading and what are you, where do you want to go.
So I want to then take the next step. You do select a great solution that surprises you, that looks promising. It leads to a pilot. Any best practices you would recommend in how to set up pilot for success? And success maybe is at the end, it doesn't work out, but for the right reasons. So how do you set up a pilot?
Here, maybe two, I would say, practices that we found in one of the studies, especially when we were analyzing the venture client, where it's quite common to do proof of concepts, was the 3 buckets and the buffer. The 3 buckets is Julia has described how some of these challenges, some of those are by pull, some of those are by push. So for instance, you can identify a challenge in a business unit and then explain to, I would say, to outside the corporation, or the corporate venturing team can identify a potential opportunity in the market and then bring that to the business unit. So on this direction, something that is quite useful for proof of concepts is to have what we would call in one of the studies the three buckets, which is once you do the proof of concept, you're going to highly probably need some budget for that, to implement that. And it's not the same if, case scenario A, the corporate venturing invests the whole budget on that, or B, you have 1/3 of the budget coming from the business unit, 1/3 of the budget from the corporate venturing team, and 1/3 of the budget from headquarters or something similar, where when you are putting the skin of the game, that you have higher chances that is going to succeed. The second one is the buffer, and you can see companies such as Telefonica, Schneider Electric, Alibaba, IBM that are using similar technique with different names, where you have the corporate venturing team. Even in your company, if I recall correctly, you have some of your team members that are doing something similar. You have the corporate venturing team, which attracts external opportunities. Then you have the business unit. But what is happening in the middle? For instance, when the corporate venturing team is trying to push that innovation into the business unit, sometimes the business units say, I have developed with my R&D team already something similar, or, maybe come back in 3 years. So how it's happening this? And what we have seen is the buffer. For instance, coming back to the example that we have cited at the beginning, BMW Garage, they have the following challenge and how they manage this buffer. So what happened there is in around 2016, they were trying to do proof of concepts, but when they wanted to start to do a proof of concept, they were going through the procurement process, and maybe after a year, they were able to start it. So Gregor Jimmy lands on that, asks for around 15 million budget, and they have 3 profiles. One profile, someone who has been in the company for many years, white hair, knows the executive committee, legal, IT, and know how to get processes approved. Number 2, someone from kind of human resources who understand the culture and how they think on the corporate side, but also the startup side, to reduce the friction. And third, someone who, once he or she identifies the challenge, in 72 hours can put you in the phone, the startup. So that buffer was able to manage this connection between the corporate venturing team and the business units. In other companies, what they are doing is they are kind of internal sellers. So for instance, let's say that we have a portfolio of startups that we have invested or that we are currently incubating or accelerating. So they spend a lot of time mapping the internal needs of business units to kind of internally sell the portfolio of solutions to those.
Yep.
And I would mention something else that I think is not in the books, but we have seen it so many times. That is how excited are the business units in terms of applying all these things. And it's very important when you are a unit of a corporate venturing unit to really look for the ones that are enthusiastic, because these are the ones that are going to get the traction in the company. And once you have one unit that is working, it's easier then to go to the next and say, look, it's happening in our company, it's happening in this unit, why you are not doing it? So I think that again, this is not in the book or it's not in the writings, but this is what you see. At the end, there is a human component that you need to take into account. That is the person that is going to be in charge in that business unit of launching these type of things should be an enthusiast, because then it's easier then to put the buck in the other, the other units.
The human component is so important. So I was at the RIE conference in Singapore 2 days ago, and in the panel I was asked, how do you convince internal business group to work with you? And I said, don't try. You will find many teams who want to work with you, and you just focus on them first, and you build success story. So
nice.
Yeah. So back to the human component, how do you create these kind of internal promoters, people who are passionate about technology? How do you identify them? Did you find any tips from your research?
Mm-hmm. Well, the way I look at it is the following. This is the corporate venturing team has one part, as Josemaria was mentioning, that is an evangelist. At the end, is doing something that the company has not done before and is not used to. So basically, you need to have a person there that is patient, that is, a good, I would say, a good public relations in the right sense, not, going around just for the sake of it, but just someone that has the patience to explain things and be enthusiastic about the topic. Why? It's because you are asking people to do things differently, and that's always, not easy. Having said that, in large corporations, you find so many good people that are being, I would say, almost disappointed because they are not able to develop these characteristics of doing things differently. So as soon as they have the opportunity, they jump on it. So, but for that, you need to have this kind of empathy to understand that, this person, when I'm talking, the eyes are blinking. This is the one that I need to go, talk, and move, because probably you will find many inside of large corporations that are waiting for those opportunities. And many times, maybe it's not in the first layer, but it's in the second. So spending time there, understanding their real needs, being sensible at the real needs they have, not trying to push things that they don't care about it. That's a waste of time, right? And many times you may think that is really, really cool, but for them, doesn't solve the problem they have. So having a good understanding, being able to listen and being empathetic with their own problems, that helps a lot.
In this direction, Nicolas, sorry, after you.
No, I was going to say, I think this is a golden nugget, which is you need this buffer, which is to protect how fragile innovation is anyway.
Oh, yeah.
And then you need someone on the inside with empathy, willing to try, and who's been maybe waiting for that. And I feel this combination is what will create the opportunity for innovation to flourish.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Sorry, I was going to say, based on what you have described, and also Julia, that in another study, something that we found is that the challenges that those companies have in this process is different from those that they are building their corporate venturing teams, scaling, or consolidating. And we did that classification because the challenges that they face are completely different. For instance, the one is what mechanisms I'm going to use, how I'm going to convince the executive committee, how much budget and from where is going to come in, where maybe on the consolidating side is now I have maybe 20 teams spread across the globe, how they are not cannibalizing the analysis among themselves, how I automate processes. So the challenges are different. That would be, I would say, one point that I wanted to raise. The second one, you mentioned if the company is starting on that building the corporate venturing team, possible practices. One that we have seen is the KPI mapping. So for instance, that the corporate venturing team understands the executive committee KPIs and the business units that they are targeted. And second, how the corporate venturing team can translate the value proposition to those KPIs. For instance, if someone is looking for short-term revenue if you are looking for, I will give you a deep tech startup in 8 years time that doesn't fit your target, is what are you talking about? The second one is make the business units the winners. So for instance, something that I found, that we found in 3 energy companies, I think was 4 years ago, is there was a chief innovation officer that what he was doing was to translate I would say the winner to the business unit. So the value proposition that he was offering to the business unit was, if this doesn't succeed, I will cover it. Otherwise, we will share the cost and you will get the visibility. Now, we are talking a lot about startups in general, but what we have not talked is 70%, precisely 69.4% of these collaborations fail, doesn't succeed. Moreover, if we go into the field of deep tech, those startups connected with emerging technologies, the success rate is even higher. So the failure rate is even higher. So when you mention how to convince business units, the tricky part, I would say, is not only for startups, but especially when you are talking with deep tech. Why? Time horizon is longer, risk is higher, and cost is higher.
Yeah. First, I like your point about business units being the winner. And corporate venturing is in the service of the corporation.
Absolutely.
So we are here to make sure that we bring value to the organization. And maybe sometimes people may forget this, but this is really a best practice, which is you're to the service of the corporation.
Yes.
I want to challenge a little thing you said, which is 69% fail. But fail doesn't mean this is a bad outcome. It just means that the explorations end up with a conclusion not to proceed, which may still be the right decision. So can you maybe give a little granularity about how you see the 69% fail as good outcome versus bad outcome?
I can go a little bit. I did a study many years ago about precisely about acquisitions, right? And acquisitions is an area, mergers and acquisitions is an area where there is a lot of failure because you expect a lot. Many times you expect large synergies and so on and so forth, and you don't get it, and so on and so forth. So basically, I would say that we are in a very similar position, right? So when a startup fails, in the general studies, it fails because it disappears. Okay, disappearing from a database doesn't mean that this startup has failed. Maybe it has been acquired in very good terms, or maybe it has been acquired in very bad terms, meaning it was really not working. Having said that, the assets go to these new corporations and get rebuilt in different ways. So you are very good, the point is very well taken that failure, that doesn't mean that you are wasting your investment. But let me tell you something important. You need to understand that not only you that understand how startups work, but people in the corporation, specifically the CFO and the CEO. They need to understand that this is not regular business, that this is not something that goes in a process where just optimizing things are going to go well. Experimentation is something that everybody talks about it, but nobody understands that for experimenting, you really need to have failures. Otherwise, as you were saying, otherwise you are not experimenting. You are just doing what you know how to do. So, but something that is so obvious for people that are immersed in that ecosystem is not obvious at all for a company that has been successful, thank you to the optimization processes and the standardization and so on and so forth. So it's going against I would say the culture of a company that is used to do things always right from the first moment. And this is not experimenting. So I think that's why it's good to know that there's a high rate of things that don't go in the way we thought. That doesn't mean that it's a failure, right?
Exactly. That's why I wanted to challenge this failure rate, because it doesn't mean failing.
Correct.
And so experimentation is not deterministic. Now, Josemaria, you talked a lot, multiple times about budget. And budget implies ROI. And this is where it's actually challenging. And in a way, I like that you said the easiest step for doing corporate venturing is a challenge, because you start from a pain point, which means it's easier to explain a ROI. But how do you think about ROI when you engage with startups in the exploration aspect?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So first of all,
I told you I was going to ask tough questions too.
I love it. Let's go for it. So let's start with some disclaimers. When we mention a failure rate, I would like to provide some data points. One is on the startup side that Julia has mentioned before. 7 out of 8 startups disappear after the first 5 years. That's the first one. Number 2, in terms of funding raise, according to another study that we did with one of our another professor, Professor Caviedes, 0.02%, which is around 1 out of 4,000 companies, raise venture capital. This is coming data from the US in both cases. And the third one, and is one of our studies, is that the devil is in the detail. So the data point that I mentioned, that around 70% is the average of the mechanisms. However, I would say in the third study that we published, we segmented this kind of success rate or failure rate by mechanism. And you can see how it differs by mechanism. Now, with that in mind, let's go to the second block that you raised on the ROI that we love, and the budgets. I would say, I think it was in a panel discussion that you were describing with James in the GCV a year or 2 years back. You were describing how there are 3 models of how corporate venturing teams usually measure their success or returns. Some of those are financial returns, and we have seen some teams that are focusing their investment thesis or their collaboration thesis in that direction. Others in strategic results, and others that are hybrids. And let's provide an example. For instance, there is a business case that was published, I think, maybe 15 years back, but is still relevant right now. And I love it because there you see how both are combined. It's the case of Intel. What they are doing, although now they are changing the model with Intel Ignite and among other different mechanisms, what they did was, we are going to invest in companies and startups that they are using our technology. So on the one side are going to be good startups that they are going to provide directly, I would say, a return on investment on the purely investment because they are good startups, but also they are going to provide us strategic results because since they are going to use our technology, our revenue side is going to grow. So they are combining both.
Very nice. I want to move on to something really special you did, which was a squad report for corporate venturing, which no one wrote about and no one wrote a framework about, but you came back with, I believe, 6 different models of squad. Do you mind maybe first sharing what it is at high level and then why you even did this research?
Good. So let me just give the overall and you go to the details, okay? Very good. So basically, we were looking at when we were doing the research, what we saw is that more and more there were corporations doing things together. And that was something that was not at the beginning. It was later when the market matures, you see that there are companies that are getting together to do this type of activity of corporate venturing. So our interest was, why are they doing it? What are the benefits? What are the problems that they are facing? What are the challenges and opportunities? And why are they doing it together? So we started just as usual, going and trying to identify around the world different types. And what we did was, what we usually do is interviewing first, having a protocol for interviewing this type of, we didn't know what it was, a squad, but it was, a group of companies doing something. So something together, you interview them, you get all the data, you have a sense of what are the issues that are interesting. And after that, you look at the data and it's like, okay, let's try to understand if there is a pattern here, if there is a pattern of different models and what are the differences in the models and why are they taking these different models into account. So basically, that's what we did. And after an analysis of several months, because we were discussing what were the typology, because at the end, when you put 6, is why not 9 or why not 12, right? So looking at the typology, trying to understand that in every bucket, you have a group of companies that are there because they are similar, they are looking for similar results or not, but at the end, they have similar characteristics that we can call it a type. So we define these 6 types in a way that then we can do some kind of recommendation for each one of them, and explain why one is better than the other, or why this covers this aspect and not this other aspect. So this is the idea and that's why it came this typology, because they were so different that it was not possible to give recommendations in general. So that's why.
Very nice. And before Josemaria, you go into the details, I have a question, which is probably a fun question. In your report for the squad, you use skydivers as a picture, which is very technical, very hard to do. You could die. So why did you choose that photo?
I think it was 5 years ago, I decided to do that. And my legs were, trembling, and I was very scared. But when you go out of the airplane, the first 10 times you usually go with others. Mm-hmm. You are connected, and then you throw yourself, and I highly recommend it.
Are you sure?
But my point here, I would say, an squad, and I'm going to provide some data points on the logics behind, because at the end is you are doing something that is risky. Mm-hmm. To do a collaboration with an startup, there is a risk associated. And second, you are connected with others as a team, as a whole. And now my data points come here. Something that we found during Corona was an increase of the volatility index, for instance, the CVOE, between 4 to 6 times. Although now it's more stable, something that we found is 3 things. Because this volatility increase, it was more challenging to identify opportunities, startups, and moreover, because the number of corporations working with startups has increased since 2016 by 4, it's more challenging to identify startups before competitors, because more people is searching and more people is getting sophisticated. Everyone is using the same databases, Crunchbase, Angelis, PitchBook, and more. So, scouting. Number 2, because there was more volatility, corporate venture teams were having less budget for innovation. Okay, less budget. Something that you love. You mentioned before that question. The third one, the value proposition. If we ask ourselves, what are we offering startups to attract them? That top-tier entrepreneur that everyone is looking in the room. And everyone is answering the same. Technical expertise, data validation, dissemination. But then the question behind is what makes you unique compared to, for instance, your main competitor, the ones that keeps you up at night. Now, with these 3 challenges, now is how we introduce this amazing sport covered, and also this concept that Julia described. Is there a way, a trend that we are seeing in the market that can tackle, or at least there is maybe the opportunity to tackle somehow those 3 challenges? And this concept where we see groups of corporations, small groups of corporations working together to innovate with the startups, let's try to match it with the challenges. On terms of the funding, maybe there is an opportunity in that corporate venture squad to share the cost of the proof of concept with the others. Second, the scouting capabilities are multiplied. Maybe you have 5 scouters, the other company 5 scouters, so you multiply by 5 or by another number. We provide the numbers in the study with the other squad members. And in terms of the value proposition, if you're an entrepreneur, what do you prefer? Technical expertise in one sector or in several? Dissemination in one sector or in several? Access to one market or to 10? And therefore, corporate venture squad we see as an emerging trend that we are starting to map some of the examples. Now, on the 6 categories that Julia described, we saw 2 variables for that segmentation on Y and X axis. On the Y axis was, are you going to do a corporate venture squad once or something recurrent, for instance, every year? And then the second category was, what's the activity that are you going to use? Is just scouting, so you want to fill your portfolio of eyes, of glasses. 2, are you looking for do a joint proof of concept, therefore testing? Or 3rd, are you looking to co-invest? And therefore that gives you a 2x3 matrix where we found those 6 categories that Julia was describing.
And there's one more granularity I loved in your report, which was about, are you looking within one industry across the value chain, all the same value chain across industries. And maybe you could share, because at the end, if you're a corporation, cost effectiveness matters, and the value proposition you just mentioned is really palpable. But how do you go about it? Do you decide to go across industry or across value chain? How do you think about it?
I think that has to do with your strategy. That's why it's so important to have in mind your framework. Otherwise, you will make decisions again just copying what someone else has done. So the first thing is like, what am I looking for? Am I looking for an innovation that will bring me to the next level? Am I looking for extending my value proposition to other parts of the value chain? I am thinking about sharing with other corporations through the startup my knowledge so we can become much stronger in our own value chain as a team, because sometimes that happens. When you have good connections with different companies in the same value chain, you may be precluding others to enter because of that strength, or other different ways of looking at these different strategies that you may think about it. So definitely, if you are looking for extending your influence or your capabilities or your ways of then connecting with other companies in the firm, you are going to go for something that is more cross value chain. If you are looking for your next level, meaning going up into the ladder, maybe you are thinking about something different, and it could be extending, or it could be just with people that are not competitors of yours, because you want to go to the next level alone, quote unquote. So, but the other companies may be interested also, and each one is going to go that step up in a different direction. What for all of you, it's a good thing, but not competing, right? So I think that here is going to depend on the strategy and also on the culture of the firm. Some firms are very good at collaborating, some firms are not so good. So, you also need to think about that when you are choosing your right strategy.
Very nice. I definitively want people to read the report. We are not going to cover everything you said in the report, but I just want to do a double click on one type, and I can choose one or you can choose one. You want me to choose?
Go ahead. Probably you are more acquainted of what the audience would be interested in.
I think the one that I find interesting is a scouting platform. Mm-hmm. So maybe you could explain the scouting platform and what's the value and when to decide for it and when not to decide for it.
Very good.
You raise a lot of questions in one. Let's try to dissect. Okay. First of all, if we go into that direction, let's start with an example, because maybe it makes it easier. You mentioned before, there are some corporate venture squads that are in the same value chain, and there are others that are multi-sector to reduce maybe the friction. Two examples would be on the same value chains we have in Sweden, Mobility X, that gathers Volvo, Ericsson, and among other companies in the automobile sector, where they are scouting, and in some cases, they are also doing proof of concepts. Then on the other side, you have, for instance, in the south of Europe, Bind 4.0, where jointly with the government, which is kind of the manager of that squad, you have more than 20 small and medium enterprises and also large corporations that where the main focus is to scout for new solutions. Now, what's the main value proposition on that activity? Following the activity name is scouting. So I do not remember the numbers, the precise numbers, but at the end of the day is how are you, accessing maybe more startups or getting access to more high quality startups, because it's not only about the size of the number, but the quality, or having access to deal flow that maybe is not in your core expertise. For instance, we have found that there are some companies that are looking to tap into deep tech startups. So, those connected with AI, blockchain, quantum computing, and others, and maybe it's not the core expertise. So it's a way to go in that direction. One recent activity that we have launched at IESE is called Digital for CAD, where we have selected by the European Commission. And what we have done is in this field, and now I'm going to provide an example, we have partnered with 8 technology centers each of the technology center is concentrated in one technology, so one for blockchain, one for cybersecurity, one for AI. And what we are doing is we are kind of the academic partner or methodological partner. And what we are doing is those technology centers are providing technologies and technology startups where small and medium enterprises are able to adopt those technologies. Now, on your question, when yes, when no? I would say I'm looking forward for Julia's answer on that one. My 2 cents would be yes, if you are, I would say if you're looking to something that maybe is not in your core or is not very dangerous, especially at the beginning. Second, if you are going to work with someone that you have worked before. Another pattern that we found is that maybe it was around 60% of the corporate venture squads, they were working with partners, with members that you were working before.
Already trusting and already engaged.
Correct. And remember that what we are doing in that precise mechanism at the end is, again, going back to the first idea, structuring a market that is unstructured. So many times when you have something unstructured, you don't know how to look at it. You don't know how to analyze it. You don't have to. So one step is like, let's try to understand what's in the market, what's there, how it looks like. And then, because many times you would not even think about what is out there. So having that structure in a way through a scouting mission, a challenge, or whatever is the mechanism at the end, helps you to get a broader view of possible solutions, real solutions, not the ones that we find in LinkedIn or that some, kind of people tell us that is already there, right? Real solutions that are already in the market. So I think that's very important.
I think that's also where the analogy to the skydivers is really fitting. It's very hard at the beginning. You need to structure yourself, but you're already trusting each other. You're not going to skydive with people you don't trust, right?
Right.
But over time, as you practice with the same, you're going to have second nature type of trust, the next level of trust and working together. And I wonder if it's not actually the ultimate value of the squad, which is you're starting to build partnership to the next level on top of doing the corporate venturing.
Absolutely. And that's why I think that having the right strategy is important, because if that's exactly what you are looking for, that is further ways, because maybe there is an R&D issue that you may be working with that company, and because you have been working on something else, then it goes together. So there are many different ways of doing it, but I would say that this is one that we found that is interesting for companies, and in fact, this is happening, right? And not all the people in the squad are going to have the same feeling or the same interest. Maybe after 2 or 3 years of working together, you find, squads that maybe is like just 2 or 3 instead of the 5 that were at the beginning. And with these 3, you do the next step. So I think that at the end of the day, collaboration is what is needed when technology is going so fast. So making easy for companies to collaborate at different levels, I think that only in itself it's valuable.
I want to ask a question about the long-lasting potential of the squad. You mentioned, I think, that it was during COVID that you noticed more and more companies partnering to do it, and clearly cost effectiveness matter, and it's the unstructured aspect and the uncertain aspect of a market. But with all the benefits you've listed across the 6 types, what's your confidence not only it's long-lasting, but it's going to become best practice? I know I'm asking you the future, not the past.
I would say I don't have data to support that statement, either A or B. I can give you my personal opinion, but that's all. What I can see so far is that more and more this mechanism is getting adopted. I'm not saying that this is successful, that is getting adopted. So more companies are using this mechanism. This is trend number 1. Trend number 2 is starting to get more sophisticated. So processes is, you just have to follow the playbook, or, so more companies know how to not only know it theoretically or conceptually, but how to implement it. And there are started to be kind of expert implementers. For more and more, I'm starting to see some not successful squads, but at least companies that are getting good results on that direction. They are improving their scouting. They are starting to do joint proof of concepts that then later on are getting a new product, a new revenue model, or something similar, and also co-investments. Those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, I would say that I would like to see the squad like when we think about a venture fund, right? A fund has a beginning and it has an end, and it has objectives that you need to reach. So squads are not there for being forever. I think that they also, if you have think about strategically what was the purpose of pulling it together, you may think that in 3-4 years it has accomplished what you were looking for, and it's fine. It's not a failure. It's just the other way around. It's like that's the right time for now closing up and going to the next thing. So I would say it's an ephemeral organization. It's not something that should last necessarily. In fact, it would be weird because probably the company is now in the next thing and needs something else, maybe a squad with different companies. So I would say that that probably is an ephemeral organization. It's not something that should be there lasting forever.
Very nice. You just mentioned funds, and I realized we spent the first 15 minutes, we're not even talking about corporate VC. But I'm sure the audience is wondering, what do you think about corporate VC?
Interesting.
Oh, that was bad.
No, it's great. It's good because it's I would say it's the traditional way of doing it. It's a very expensive mechanism. But I have seen, and this is interesting, I have seen companies that have built their own ecosystem, their own corporate venturing ecosystem, starting with a corporate venture capital. So I would say, I'm not saying that, but for many companies, that's not reachable. They cannot start like this. But the ones that I have seen that they have done a good job in pulling together a corporate venture capital, and then from there, take advantage and build the whole ecosystem, meaning other activities, meaning other mechanisms, and taking advantage of all the work that a corporate venture capital is doing, it has been fantastic. So for the company that can afford it, I think it's a very good way to think about, strategically, to think about that. But not only thinking that the corporate venture capital is the only thing, or it should be alone. I think there is a call clearly for improving the whole ecosystem, starting from here, that you have a very, I would say, sophisticated team working, understanding the ecosystem. So you start with a very good foot. Now, for middle-sized and small companies, that is not feasible many times. Maximum, they can get together with another to put a fund and so on, but usually it's not feasible for them to start one. I would say then don't try, right? Go for something that could be, you could get the results without that huge expensive cost that a corporate venture capital is. That, by the way, for a large corporation is not important because you know in the size it's feasible, right?
I like the way you frame it, because for small to medium company, they can't afford it. And sometimes for a very large company, the financial return on the fund will not move the needle. And so maybe I should ask the questions, at which size do you think it starts to make sense for corporations to think about a corporate VC?
Sorry for my these are tough questions. So I would say two comments that I was writing in my pad. One is the why. First of all, so rather than the size, is why are we creating a CVC? And to have extreme clarity. It's not because my competitor is doing it, it's because I have listened it in one conference, or it's because everyone is using it, but the why, what we want to achieve in which time horizon and with how much budget. The second one, to reinforce the message of Julia, which is I foresee the CVC as an ecosystem with other mechanisms. For instance, I'm not saying that the following is the right path, but it's an example of one of the paths that some companies are using. Maybe a startup starts with a scouting part, and a scouting mechanism, then goes to a POC, a proof of concept, then maybe it's invested or even follow up through the CVC, and then maybe it's acquired. So I would say the CVC, and as a holistic perspective with other mechanisms. And about the size, I have seen many different things. So for instance, right now it's quite quite common the fund of funds, where you can dissect your portfolio in different ways. Then you have, for instance, small and medium enterprises that they are not able to have a minimum size to be to have an ROI or enough, I would say, budget to attract the startups, and they partner with other SMEs to have a minimum fund. Then you have large corporations that they have from different sources, either from balance sheet or other sources to get the funding. So it really depends. I don't have a one rule for everyone for everything.
And you're right with this last thing, that many times what is important also is understanding if they are doing it from the balance sheet or if it's a fund, a standalone fund. Many times companies don't have a standalone fund, but they have an investment strategy that is not so aggressive, because you don't need an ROI on that money. It's a money that keeps flowing into opportunities that you see. At the end, the activity is the same of a fund, but it doesn't have the structure and it doesn't have the need for returns in terms of a portfolio. So nowadays, companies that are investing in startups, you find many, not necessarily out of a fund, but out of their own balance sheet. So,
yeah. And this is why this podcast is called Corporate Venturing Insider and not Corporate Venturing Capital Insider. There's so many things you can do in terms of corporate venturing. And what you say about strategy, start with strategy, is so important, because there are so many choices you can make. Some make sense, some will not make sense.
In fact, when I talk to the students and when we work with executives, the first question is that the one? Because you may have very different strategies, but if they are coherent with who you are as a company, it may be the right way to go. And it's very different from someone else that has a different culture, different structures, different way of organizing, different talent, different people. That needs to be different for sure. So I would say that coherence on that strategy is what is important, I think.
Now, if we think about the entrepreneurs, this is very challenging for them to understand how to engage with a corporation when there are so many ways corporate venturing can be done. What would be your advice to entrepreneurs?
Well, I would say first, let's say, when you think about entrepreneurs, you may be thinking about someone that is already a scale-up, meaning someone that maybe is in their 10th year, already several millions of revenues, but they want to jump to 100 million, right? So someone that is looking for that. Okay, that's a very different situation of someone that has just put one product in the market successfully, starting to sell with a good business model, but not there yet, like trying to develop the next generation of products and so on and so forth. Very different what you are looking for. So in the young one, let's say, I would say pairing with a corporation could be really good for you in terms of developing a portfolio of other products that you may not be able to do by your own. You have been successful in developing one, hitting it, being very good at it, but you cannot live out of that product if you want to grow faster and you want to go to the next level. Now, pairing with a large corporation, and I'm thinking about an energy company that has done that many times, and it's like, okay, pairing with them puts you a lot of assets, close to you that you may be using precisely for, first of all, growing fast on your main product and then developing the portfolio of other products that would put you in that situation where you will be not a scale-up, but already a grown-up company. Going IPO and many things, I'm thinking about several of these examples, like, for instance, Wallbox together with Iberdrola. So at the end, if you are like this, I would say look for a corporation that may help you to grow, not necessarily being acquired, because that's not what we are seeing. We are seeing many small companies working with these large corporations, not being acquired by them, just working with them and growing together. Well, for the big one, is not growing together, it's just solving a problem, but yes, for the startup. If you're a scale-up, that's a different game, right? Because here we are talking about something that is closer to a joint venture, an agreement, so different ways of looking at that. Now, here it's going to depend on what are you looking for. Are you looking for a distribution market? Are you looking for entering international markets? Are you looking for, so it depends on what you are looking for.
Josemaria, what would be your advice to entrepreneurs?
To reflect on the following 5 questions. Number 1, are your KPIs align with the ones of the corporate venturing team or the corporation? Number 2, are the time horizons similar? Number 3, is the corporation has, and also yourself, the required budget and resources for that proof of concept or pilot? Number 4, what are the risks associated? For instance, if the corporation has to scale, do you have the resources to scale? And does the corporation has the resources? And 5, who is your internal sponsor, and is it enough senior and knows how to move within the company for that proof of concept? Those 5 questions.
I think we are ending with a beautiful golden nugget. Thank you so much for your time today. I think the audience got so much to think about, and I recommend them to read the report. I'm going to give the link down so that people can check it out.
Excellent. Thank you very much for having us, Nicolas, and looking forward to meet you again someplace in the world.
Very soon.